thought-provoking
Public art.
with us, Louise and Laura from Francis Knight Public Art Consultancy.
Conversations with a range of arts practitioners, community activists, planning directors and design teams about how we can make places better by working with artists.
Our role as public art consultants is all about the delicate balance of client expectations to encourage new ways of seeing, developing relationships, connecting people and enabling the creative process.
Today we meet Mark Osborn. Mark Osborn has worked in the property industry for over 30 years, accumulating a wide-ranging knowledge and experience. He began in local government, working for 9 years in the planning departments of local authorities. He then moved to a private planning consultancy, which led on to a role with a small-scale house builder dealing with land acquisition and planning.
After the financial crash, he began working in a development role for a major national house builder, delivering larger strategic projects, which was where he first got involved with commissioning public art.
Despite having roots in the hard-headed world of planning and development, he has always had a fascination with art and design and believes that a landscape-led development is usually a more successful one. For him, public art should not be designed by committee and should always be thought-provoking.
More recently, Mark has moved back into local government, leading the housing development and enabling team at Gravesham Borough Council. Welcome, Mark Osborn. Welcome to Talking Public Art Series 2, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We just kind of wanted to have a conversation with you from sort of a more commercial point of view, perhaps. But just to say that obviously we started working with you with Countryside Properties on a gateway commission for Ashford, which is a big settlement, 3,000 homes. And I think when we first started working with you, Mark, it did strike us that you were really interested in public art. For us, that's quite unusual because normally we're kind of bought in because it's a condition of some kind or it's a tick box of some kind. But you were genuinely keen and engaged in the process of bringing an artist on board. And then obviously we discovered that's because you've done it yourself before, working in another part of Kent with another developer. So, but we're kind of interested in your career, particularly in the public realm. And so working backwards, because we know that you're currently working with Gravesham.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about your career path and how you are where you are now.
I started off over 30 years ago now working in local government, then for in the planning department, and I worked in development control for planning departments of 2 councils for 9 years. I then moved on and worked in a planning consultancy for another couple of years, and then one of my clients from that consultancy was a house builder, smallish house builder, who approached me about joining them and working directly for them. And so my career took a slightly different turn. I was still doing planning for them, but I was also learning and developing land acquisition for them. So I did that with them for nearly 8 years. And then the crash happened in 2008-09. Unfortunately, I was redundant for best part of a year, which was quite a challenging period. But then I got a new job working in for Crest Nicholson, and they have a sort of development role, which I guess covers land acquisition, planning, but also more managing the projects for them. And I started in that role, and I worked for Crest for 6 years, and then moved to Countryside, and I worked for Countryside for another 6.5 years doing the same thing. And I tended to, I think probably because of my planning experience, gravitate to working with them on larger strategic projects. And these projects is where I was sort of introduced to public art, because obviously it becomes a factor there in that planning authorities quite often put conditions or obligations through their planning permissions on to provide public art. However, in the cases where I have largely been promoting and putting forward public art on sites, I've done it for other reasons, and it's not because of being forced to through a obligation from a local authority.
That's quite rare, actually, Mark,
Yeah,
to work that way. Not
I
many
think in the
voters
first
do
the
that,
first time I came across it was I was developing a site down in Ashford, which was a big major greenfield site, which is now developed, called Finbury.
Mm-hmm.
And this site had a rather difficult beginning in that it was bought at the peak of the market, I guess, and it had to travel through the downturn in 2008-9 onwards. And I picked it up at sort of 2009, and it was looking a rather sick dog, and we tried to adapt various parts of it. But then when we were like starting to think about launching the site, which we didn't launch until 2013, the peculiarities of the site started to dawn, I think, on everybody, in that it was an isolated site, and to get to it, we were building a 1 kilometre road across a floodplain to get to it. And so for the general public who were travelling, and this was off one of the bypasses around the south of Ashford, and so the public wouldn't have been necessarily that aware of the site, and we wanted to bring the public's attention to it, because all they would see would be a road junction. They wouldn't see the housing development because it was a kilometre away. And we were looking at ways of doing that, and one of the ways I thought was perhaps looking through internet and all sorts of things was, how about let's do something with public art. Now, luckily at the time there were board members at Artcrest who were very supportive of public art, and they had done it on previous schemes, I think further west towards Bristol, and they'd done some quite major public art, and I went down there and visited it and had a look round, and it immediately struck me that this was going to be a good way of drawing attention to the site. And I received, it was really great because I received support from the board and a substantial budget, but then I had no idea how to go about acquiring this public art. So I got a connection through one of the board members to the Design Council, and I approached the Design Council, and they put me in touch with someone who worked for them who was also a public art consultant, and he helped set this up and help me draw up a scope for the work, and set up a competition, and I learnt a lot through that process. And I think it is a strange world, because the art world and the development world, you wouldn't have thought are immediately well connected. Development people tend to be, don't want to stereotype too much, but they're sort of fairly cold hard businessmen who are worried about the numbers, and you wouldn't have thought that they would have any and we didn't really have much of an idea about the art world. I myself, though, I've got quite an interest in art. I love art. I like to scribble a bit myself, and I've always had a fascination with that side of things, and certainly in my job in development, I've always been interested in the design aspect and interested in working for companies who don't want to just build boxes. They want to build something a bit more extraordinary and individual for the sites. And through my work over the last 20 odd years, I've learned that a landscape-led development is usually a more successful one. And part of that really starts to overlap into public art.
It's quite refreshing to hear that from you, actually, Mark, because as you say, we do a lot of work with big housing developers. And you're right that there is those two sectors coming together do clash, but when they work well, they're incredible and they work really well. I'm really interested, so you're talking about the Fimbri development in Ashford, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which, so for our listeners can go and have a look. It's called, and there's artists there that have been working on it with you. I'm really interested to know how you got on working directly with an artist. How did you find that?
Well, my approach to working with artists is that, and in this case, it was very much, it had to be a very large statement gateway piece. And in fact, we had two gateways. You had one gateway, which was the connection of the development to the main road, the bypass, and then, you know, the customers, residents, whatever you want to call them, would travel along this 1 kilometre road, and then we would have another piece, slightly less in terms of scale, but signalling that you're entering into what was effectively a new village. And so, as I say, I had some help in sort of scope, but I had very little idea of exactly what I wanted. It needed to obviously be some sort of signpost signal for people to know where the location of the site was. But my approach of working with artists is, whilst you've got to get, I guess, what you need across and what the commercial business needs across, I like to leave the artists to develop their own ideas. I'm not trying to influence them particularly. There is an aim, and I would stress to them there's an aim. This is what we're trying to achieve. How they go about achieving it, I'd rather leave to them. They're the artists after all. This is what I'm paying for, is their imagination and their experience in doing how to do this. It's not for me to tell them what to do. If you wanted to do that, there are plenty of places where you could buy, I guess, more or less off-the-shelf things to put on your sites. But I don't think that is the right approach. And it's interesting when you do that and you go out then to a competition, the variety of different approaches to the same aim is quite enlightening and thought-provoking. And after all, that's what I think that public art should be about. It should be thought-provoking.
Yeah, we would agree. And I think, what you had with Crest Nicholson there was kind of the ideal setup in a way. You've got the backing of your board, which, on many occasions we might get to a point and then it has to go to a board. We won't know that board. It'd be completely anonymous to us. And as you know, the artist really is the is the key person in all of this, because they're if they can talk directly to the people that are making the decisions, then they will understand fully where the proposal's coming from. But often that does get diluted through a chain, because it will be the artist, it'll be us working with someone like you, Mark, and then it'll be your senior management, and then there might be a board. We're going through a chain of people.
I think the key to it is the decision makers on the public art piece that goes out. It doesn't want to be too wide. I don't think anything designed by a committee is necessarily successful. And then people have got to be brave enough to let decisions be made. And I was really fortunate that the support that I had from the board at Crest at the time was that go away and make it happen, more or less. And I think that they understood, because they'd done it before on other sites, that more interference from them would not be helpful. And provided that I was working within certain parameters on budget, timing, and other things, other practical aspects, which we all have to take into account, like maintenance, how it's going to be installed, etc., provided that was done, I was given a free arm. And I think that in this commissioning of public art, I think there needs to be a core group of people who are decision makers, but I think that if it goes too wide, the artist's creative instincts will be diluted, and the outcome would be very different.
Quite often as well, with the projects that we work on, Mark, we are the constant. The artist and ourselves are the constant, and people do come and go within the teams. They get moved on to bigger developments or they work on other things. So it's trying to keep that as well. And I agree with you. It's having a core of commissioners. It's like a little panel, isn't it? That we work together. We have an aim. The artist is within that team as well and knows what's going, what they're doing, what the parameters are, and we're allowed to get on with the work.
Yes, and you're a key link in this, in the conduit between, I guess, the commercial world in which I operate and the artistic world in which they operate, and you've got to have an understanding of both sides of that coin, and come up with a reasonable compromise that's going to deliver the results that the customer, the client, is looking for. And
you're right. The commercial world does need to be brave as well in some of those decisions, because they're making huge decisions about their development, aren't they? What the land value, the spend on that, the building of the housing, the selling of the housing, what they're going to make, the profits they're going to make. So
and in today's world as well, I think in today's world where PR is almost becoming, more and more important with the internet, with social media, is you've got to remember the public art aspect is the outward facing image of the development with the company's name over it, and this is extremely important. If things went badly wrong, it could be very damaging. And whilst, public art, I don't think, it's not necessarily going to be liked by everybody. No. There's got to be a quality about it where people can see that and see the have differing opinions on it. That's fine, but not see that, something of poor quality has been turned out to fulfill a box-ticking exercise.
Yeah, we would agree. I think our role is very... we kind of see our role as giving the artist space to develop their work without too much outside influence, but being aware of, constraints, obviously, and opportunities, and for the client, for the developer to know that they're going to get something of quality, and that they can trust the process, and there might be a few little ups and downs throughout that process, but it's a journey, and we're here to sort of support both the artist and the client deliver that. I think is certainly where we see ourselves, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, the trouble is the development role is like your role is within companies is generally an all-encompassing role, in that you are a conduit for the different parts of the business, be them sales, construction, everything flows through the development officer or development manager at the time, and you've got to manage all that. That's part of the role. And, for example, at Ashmere with Countryside, we went ahead and I think I managed to get a relatively focused group of people making decisions on it with your guidance.
Absolutely.
As soon as those decisions were made and the ideas were, I guess, disseminated to the wider group in the company, I did get people from different groups, sales, and people going, "Oh, I don't like that. I'm not sure about this. What are you doing?" I think salespeople will obviously see art as another tool to their enabling them to sell and market their site and the properties on the site. Whilst it can be that's not a primary reason for it to be there.
No.
The reason for it to be there is to create a sense of place, I guess some sort of anchor for a community, and getting people to. We're creating new places. These are new settlements, giving it an identity.
It's quite interesting when you say sales, the sales people and the marketing team, because sometimes the sales team comes in and looks at the work as sometimes as the final decision. That's happened to us before, and it's like, hang on a minute, we don't know who you are, we've never met you, the artist doesn't know who you are. So that's quite a difficult situation to be in. And luckily, and obviously with the work that we do and the way that we work, we kind of bring the artist in, they meet the sales team, and then the sales team get and understand where we've come from. But that is quite a difficult conversation sometimes, as you mentioned, because marketing is very valuable, and it works in both ways, in the way that it kind of promotes the artist and the work that they're doing, but it also promotes the development and the public art. But it can be quite a fine line when we're working with marketing teams, actually. Yeah, it does come in.
I think one of the big challenges for us is sometimes for the value of the public art to be recognised, because often we work with artists, and you'll know this, Mark, that the energy and commitment that artists put into developing their proposals is, there's such a commitment there. There's so much research, and there's so much of their creative energy that they don't just sit there and think, oh yeah, that would do. There's a process. However they work, whether that is contextual research, whether they kind of go and talk to people or do engagement activity, it's huge. So sometimes the challenge is to use that collateral, all that material, to help. I think sometimes that's missed, actually, that to use that to help promote the site as well, because this is meaningful placemaking. This isn't just saying we're doing placemaking. This is genuine. This is artists connecting with place and people, and trying to sort of bring those links into the development, so that there is that meaning there as well. So that's kind of one of our bugbears.
I agree with you. I think I become as absorbed in it, I guess, as the artist, and I think it's really important that someone on the client side is on board with this, and is really picking up, grasping the idea behind it all, and is promoting it on their behalf. Because, as I say, within the industry, there are people with, I guess, more. They're going to have a more commercial view on it, and they look at things in a very sort of cold fashion, I guess. Art isn't like that. It's blurring of the edges. Public art, as I said before, I think does overlap to a certain extent with identity, into marketing to a degree, into the whole shape of the development. Landscaping can be formed around it, and therefore that informs the development in a wider context. The placemaking, as we say, is very important for getting an identity for a new settlement. That identity can travel far and wide, in that it becomes recognised as part of the company's identity. I mean, people might recognise the piece of public art at Finsbury on the road is quite a striking piece, and I'm sure it engenders quite strong opinions, and people will associate that with the company who put it there, Crest Nicholson. So there is there is wide reverberations about what you do around public art, and the artist, I feel, needs to feel supported. As I say, you've got to be brave and make bold decisions. Making a bland decision through a wide committee of people with different views and differing aims will not produce, in my view, successful public art. We've all seen glass, steel spheres with water pouring over them outside,
Yes, we have.
business parks and things. Does anybody remember it? Is it memorable? Is it provoking any sort of reaction? No, it isn't. And public art is got a bigger role to play than that.
I think also our role as public art consultants is to be brave as well, actually, when we're working with our clients and pushing back a bit maybe and saying, actually, no, it's not going to be a sphere with water coming out of it, or, it's not going to be something you could get from a catalogue.
Yeah.
It's something that's new and innovative and right for the development and bespoke and all those lovely words.
Well, it's not just the piece, I think. You've also got to guide us on get the right artist for the client. And I think the artists have got to be understanding of the world where the commissioning people are coming from as well.
I agree. Yeah.
And see it from a different standpoint and not be overly precious about their concept and be willing to adapt their concept for good practical reasoning and commercial reasoning.
I think
those sort of artists will be successful working with you.
Yeah, because I think that's about collaboration, isn't it? That's about working together, working with your design teams in workshops or with the client to make sure that the work is fit for purpose and is the right piece of work for that development.
Yeah, all successful developments are all about collaboration anyway, and working in the development world, it is about drawing together, a complex group of experts, consultants to produce what is ultimately, quite a complex thing. A new development has got so many different elements and it's getting everybody to work together. And the successful developments are where that happens and it starts to sing.
I think also when you've got your lovely piece of public art in and everyone's happy and we launch it, we go, ta-da! It's also about sort of looking after it, isn't it, afterwards, and maintaining it and keeping it, in its rightful, how it was when it was put in, really. That's quite important too, isn't it?
What a developer's looking for is obviously low maintenance costs, because these are going to ultimately be passed on to the residents, may make the properties less marketable. I'll tell you a funny story about the Flying Geese at Ashford, in that obviously spent months and months working with Bruce on that, and I never went to the factory to see it. He sent me pictures, but I wanted to sort of leave him alone and let him get on with it.
Yeah.
And I wanted that ta-da reveal moment myself, and I left him and the site team to organise the installation, and I then went down to site, and we'd carefully chosen the location. Mm-hmm. And I went down to site and I realised that I hadn't had the trees cut back enough, so the ta-da moment was a bit of a damp squib because there were loads of trees obscuring the view, and I very quickly, before the great and the good of Crest Nicholson tumbled down to site, I quickly had to employ a tree surgeon to cut them down so we could actually see it. This £250,000 piece was hidden behind trees. It would have been a major problem.
They are quite iconic down there, I would say, Mark. I drove past there recently myself. You do still look to the left and see the geese. The trees are growing up around them, I might add. But for the listeners, it's Bruce Williams is the artist, isn't he? He's a Brighton-based artist.
Yeah, and you've got to remember, it's been there now nearly 10 years. So
it's incredible. Yeah.
What I love about it is it's totally unexpected.
It is.
You drive, over a crest of a hill to get there, and all of a sudden you see these geese, and I'm sure people think, what the hell are they doing there? What's that all about? And that's, in a way, that's the reaction you want, isn't it? It's memorable.
Yeah.
I'm sure people there direct visitors to the site by saying, you know, turn left at the geese.
Yeah, I
And
think
that was
it's
the
used
idea,
yeah.
you know, it was a signpost. That's what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little about some of our little bugbears that we have. Do you have any surrounding commissioning public art at all, Mark?
Well, you've got to. I think you've got to limit. As I said before, it's a careful balancing out to trying to be trusted to let people get on with things and not have too much interference. And I think if you get too many opinions round a table, as I say, you'll end up with a poor outcome. And I think it's trying to get some people who perhaps are not from or haven't got that same point of view, not from that world, very commercial, hard-nosed people to let go and let it happen. And I think that's the key, you know, it's about control, isn't it? You've got to let the artist have his or hers, you know, own mind and let them run with it. And I think that's the really tricky part. It's almost trying to keep people out of it. More than trying to, you know, there's a lot of things we do which you want to get involvement of a wide variety of people, but I think diluting art by doing that is a really negative thing. And it's whilst you're trying to keep them, you know, they're commissioning large amounts of money on these things, whilst you want to keep them informed about it, you don't want them starting to have huge amount of influence. You want to let the artists have their moment and let them develop it in a certain way. And you've just got to convince people that they can be trusted and that certain aspects which we are wanting to control, program, budget, as you said, future maintenance, practicality, those things we can control and we'll keep a leash on, but letting the creative part of it, let the artist do that. That's why you're commissioning an artist. So you know, they're the things. I think my bugbears, as I said before, is things that just are unimaginative. People buy off the shelf, box ticking exercise. I think that public art can be a huge benefit to a development. It brings the wider public. If you're dropping a whole new settlement into an established area, you can get the people in the established area involved in the process. They then feel, you know, to some degree of attachment to the new development rather than a them and us view. You know, I think there's so many benefits that perhaps are not immediately seen in the bottom line of all these commercial companies looking at their profit, but I can assure you there are hidden advantages which will increase values and make the development more successful.
So you're talking then about the value of public art. So we are in a bit of a economic crisis at the moment.
Yeah.
A little bit. Inflation's rising. You know, you talk about the benefits of a development, you know, public art.
Yes.
You know, how going forward, how do you see the role of public art?
It's going to be far more difficult to get these things commissioned, I think, for you, because it's demonstrating. I mean, people get far more focused on the numbers through these times, obviously.
Yeah.
And being able to demonstrate that tangible financial gain from it is extremely difficult to do. I'm sure there are people around who are able to somehow measure it, but I think that's seriously the challenge. I mean, in every aspect of what we do, I mean, there's a lot of talk about, for example, green technology, and I think a lot of developers and house builders are quite on board with bringing that into play and want to actually do more than the regulatory requirements. However, you can do that in a buoyant market. When the market is becoming constrained by rising costs, lowering values, people start to pull back from what they see as luxury extras, and you start to strip back some of these things. And for sure, public art will be on that hit list with certain developers who will say it's a luxury we cannot afford.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of where planning comes back in again, though, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, because they force the arm, if you like, and make it happen. But that doesn't necessarily mean to say that the outcome will be a good one, because developers will still be keeping an eye on costs and maybe more inclined to go down an easier route to producing and ticking the box for public art with planning than taking this braver route which we were talking about of, really letting artists be creative and letting people like you guys manage it.
Yeah. Interesting times, I think. And it's interesting that you find you're back in a sort of planning role as well, or certainly with
I'm not in the planning, I'm still in a development role, but I've now gone back to working with, it's like going back to my roots of working in local authority. I think I've taken a view of, I wanted to do something a little different. I didn't want to just go into another, commercial house builder who perhaps is at the whim of shareholders and the city and that sort of thing. And I felt that public sector housing, for example, is a really important need, and I could bring some of my commercial experience and skills to the public sector to improve efficiency and get more of these houses built and get people off housing lists on off the streets and into housing. I mean, I think public buildings and public areas of regeneration, we're looking to regenerate Gravesend as a town. We're seeking, the government levelling up funding and things like this. Part of that is about re-providing a sense of place. I think a lot of town centres, for example, are becoming soulless shells as retailers are pulling out. And it's how to reinvent the town centre, I think, and reclaim it perhaps for the public space rather than the commercial space. And part of that will be developing imaginative landscaping and public art ideas and get people to retake them and have civic pride in their places. So I do think
big job for you then, Mark, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking to build a whole new civic area, new civic centre, new theatre, and no doubt part of that will involve, a public square, piazza, and public parks and things like this. And art is a really important part of it. I mean, Gravesend has got some interesting piece of public art. I think probably everybody knows about sort of the Pocahontas statue and things like this.
Yeah.
But over the years, those have been sort of moved out of the main focus for the public onto the fringes of the town centres. The commercial shopping centre became a big thing, and they're difficult to find. Some of these pieces of beautiful pieces of public art in town centres are now really, as I say, on the fringes. You have to go and look for them, and we need to put them back front and centre as part of the place-making experience of a town.
Yeah. Well, in
Give
fact,
it an identity.
We did commission a piece ourselves, which is as you say, on the fringe a little. It's close to the river, outside LV21, which is the red lightship that's based there. And it's a Puji, bronze of RAF pilot, Sikh pilot.
Yes.
And we know quite close to it, there's been a second commission, which is the Queen in her full regalia. But certainly the Puji statue, which was commissioned by Gravesham, but also the Sikh community, has a huge following. You know, the amount of people that go to that on a daily basis, actually, sort of like to pay their respects. I've been there on several occasions where that happens. But you're right, it's on the fringe. It's on the fringe.
I think that's because through the late 20th century, certainly, I mean, a lot of town centres were changed quite radically, and these sort of shopping centres were dropped into them. I think now as the retail business shrinks, and I think we're seeing more of a reclaiming back of town centres, we're putting residential back into town centres, whereas it was cleared out before. We're putting restaurants, theatres, these sort of things are going back in to try and get a 24-hour economy in them and to get life back into these town centres. You know, I think that a lot of these elements which have been pushed to the fringes, and includes public art, can be brought back in and give the town centre an identity. I mean, you can walk into many town centres all over the country and you wouldn't know exactly where you were. There's
Maidstone's the same. Yeah,
there's no identity to them. It's just a place. I mean, one near me, for example, in Kingston, you know, there's a fabulous piece of public art, I don't know whether you know it, with a load of telephone boxes that are falling like dominoes.
I don't know.
And I'm sure at one point that was really part of the town, the core of the town. And over the years, as the town has developed and built the Bentle Centre and the shopping, the centre of the town has actually shifted to a different place. And it's now, you know, in a street which I suspect not many people know it's there and walk past it. And I think that's happened across the country. And these town centres need to get vibrancy, life back into them, and an identity, and get that civic pride back into them, rather than just being, you know, a commercially driven identity.
Watch this space. Then we will keep our ears open for Gravesham then.
Well, we hope to do that, and as I say, we hope to reconnect. I think the town needs to be reconnected with the river. I think as things changed and industry along the river and the use of ferries along the river reduced post-war, the town has sort of turned its back on the river, and it's no longer an asset and that it could be, and it needs to be now brought back into the town and be a true asset for Gravesend.
Wonderful. You've touched a little bit at the beginning of this podcast. You mentioned that you like to do a little bit of art yourself, Mark.
Yep.
So what kind of things do you like doing?
Painting, pictures, landscapes. I quite often, when I'm on holiday, I'll take a sketchbook and I'll sit and whilst everybody's sat on the beach, I'll sit and sketch away. I don't have a great deal of time for it. I'd like to have more time. I'm very interested in looking at art, going to gallery exhibitions and things like this. And I hope one day when I hang up this work life to spend a lot more time doing it. I've always been interested in art. I did O-level, A-level art.
Mark.
I think it's a really important part of the colour of life. I think without it, it's a very dull place.
Yeah, and I think you've been a great advocate for public art and for the work that we do. Certainly on the work that we were doing in Ashmere. So and we need more people like you. Actually,
we do.
In development.
I sometimes think. I mean, I unfortunately I'm no longer working on that Ashmere job, but I hate to think if I hadn't been working on it and initiated that, I don't think it would ever have happened.
We agree.
We agree.
And I look forward to seeing what comes out of it with great interest.
Yes, watch this space. I think
it's quite a challenging site, mainly because it's on an entrance on a big roundabout. there's a lot of street clutter, so to speak, around
is
that.
A bit, yes.
And getting something which can really stand out and be prominent is the biggest challenge there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you,
It's been
Mark.
a great
Lovely.
conversation. It's been really great. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Engaged, creative, curious, courageous and valued, Francis Knight is an award-winning independent public art consultancy based in South East England with over 16 years' experience offering expert advice and management in commissioning high-quality art for the public realm. As co-founders and directors of the business, Louise Francis and Laura Knight commission professional artists from across the UK to create ambitious public realm artworks in a variety of locations. The consultancy partners closely with housing developers, design teams, social housing associations and local authorities, together with a wide range of community groups, to create brave, ambitious, thought-provoking art for public spaces.
Over this series of podcasts, we will be looking at different ways that developers can engage with artists as part of a design team, and how, if it's done right, these working relationships can lead to meaningful, lasting and joyous contributions to our townscapes and landscapes. In our next episode, we talk to artist Kerry Lemon about escaping being pigeonholed as an illustrator and getting into public art, being a one-woman B Corp, mentoring and supporting women to do what she does, leaving a societal and environmental legacy.
Plus being open, honest and sharing why she can't believe her own luck, and tap dancing. If you enjoyed this episode, we would really appreciate it if you could rate, review and subscribe to our podcasts. It helps us spread the word on demystifying public art.